All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Um, I'll be recording this and we'll post it somewhere, as well as this little visual I put together. Um, Again, as we go along, if you have questions, put them in the chat, or if you have a question you want to ask in a particular moment, put the little raise your hand up thing. Or actually, this isn't that big of a group. You can go ahead and just, unmute yourself. So we'll go ahead and get started. I think most of you know me decently well, but yeah, the last 3.5 years I've been doing seminary online. And I started that when I didn't have kids. I was married but didn't have kids. And as I've progressively had more kids, I've kind of changed what that looks like. But I've been also working full time while in seminary. And so you kind of have to learn a lot of priority management, time management, and really time management. I like viewing it more as priority management, and we'll kind of talk about that. But as your priorities shift based on your season of life, your schedule should too. So I started off taking, 3 master's level classes per semester, and that's just not attainable in certain seasons of life. So that's kind of my background, and God's taught me a lot through that time, and read a lot of different resources on how to use your time well and that sort of thing. So we're all kind of in the same boat now in terms of doing online school, but also kind of missing out on the in-person aspect, which I can relate with. School is not the same when you're not doing it with people who are next to you and you're getting to interact with, and even with your professors, it's just different. So there's an element of kind of what these next 5 weeks will look like, and even through the summer if you're doing summer classes too. It's just not ideal. And so sometimes if you kind of lower your expectations a little bit, that can sometimes help you engage with it. Like this probably won't be as good as school normally is, and that's okay. It's not fun, but it's kind of where we're at. So and with this too, the goal is not just to have a perfect schedule, and a perfect schedule really doesn't exist. Things change constantly throughout the week. Joe will most likely walk through the door at some point during this and interrupt things, and that's what life does. Sometimes we get interrupted, so we don't want to be so rigid with our schedules and the practices that we have that there's no room for things to change. So a lot of this is principles, and we'll get into some specific practices and stuff like that, but a lot of this is principles that hopefully will be helpful to you. So we're going to be talking about 6 principles: creating rhythms, creating sacred spaces, managing your energy and motivation, your focus and productivity, time and assignments, and then enlisting accountability. And that kind of brings all of this together, is that the key to online learning is don't do it alone, which is ironic because you may be the only person in your house, or stuff like that. But there are ways to do this with other people that just help actually make it successful. So let's start with the first one. So creating rhythms. For those of you who are here, you can post this in the chat or unmute yourself. Either works. How many of you have set class times where you're watching like a live lecture video, you're on Zoom or something like that? And how many of you have like pre-recorded videos or lectures that your teachers are having you watch? Bridges are mostly like fixed lectures. A little both for Megan, set for Emily, a little bit both for Matthew. Okay. So I've done, C Payne says both. Nice. I've done both so far. So the majority of my classes have been where all of the content is already online. So you could do all of your material in a short amount of time if you really wanted to. Never done that. And I've done some classes where I stream into a live lecture class. It's the same time, every week, twice a week, or, different stuff like that. So I've done a little bit of both. And you kind of have to work with both of those differently. One of the nice things about having to go to a lecture is that time is always guaranteed for you. A benefit but challenge of when you have pre-made material that you just have to do is that you get to choose when to do it, but you also have to be more intentional with doing it. So we'll get into some of those specifics. I just wanted to kind of know where you guys are coming from. So creating rhythms, creating consistent daily and weekly patterns and rhythms of work, rest, fun, and friendship. They ultimately help you keep what is a priority and what you want to be a priority as an actual priority, and not let the wrong things creep in and dominate our lives and our schedules. I mean, a synonym for rhythm is habit, but habit means different things, different people. So sometimes I just use rhythms. The goal is we're looking for consistency that will become recognizable and expected for you in whatever space you're in. So I've kind of broken this into daily rhythms and weekly rhythms because there are some things that you won't do every day that wouldn't be good for you to do every day, but there are some things that you need to do every day. We'll talk about this more with specific time management and creating a schedule, but I think one of the most helpful things that I've done is that for a work week, and for me, that's Monday through Friday, I try my best to do everything I can in that time so that weekend is for family. But start each day at the same time. It's a lot easier to control the beginning of your day than it is the end of the day. So pick a time that you want to start your day, and be consistent with that. You want to learn to develop and work within good rhythms for work and school. When are you going to go to class, or when you have to go to class, or maybe when are your best times for working on things? Maybe that the kind of 1 to 3 p.m. chunk of time is just a terrible time. You're tired, can't focus. Don't try to do school in that time. You'll kind of learn the periods of the day that work best for that, but you want to be consistent with those kinds of things. And this will take development. But you also need rhythms of engagement. And I gave 3 categories here: engaging God, engaging other people, and engaging rest. And these are things that have to be rhythms, intentional planned rhythms in your schedule. Because most of the time, these are the kinds of things that will get pushed out when we often either have no rhythm or no kind of pattern to our schedule, or when we didn't plan well and things get out of control. And now it's kind of like, oh, I needed to give all of my time to school, and I can't give any of my time to these other things that I want to be priorities. That's usually a symptom of not having good rhythms and scheduling in the first place. So I call these rhythms of engagement because these are things that it's not mindless. It's not distraction. It's engagement in a different direction. And that ultimately ends up being positive. It gives you, they're restorative. It gives you back something that is being depleted from work or school or something like that. All of these principles also, they apply for work context too, that you have a degree of control of your schedule. As NAV staff, there's not much in our schedule that's fixed. There's a lot that's moving around a lot of times. So these kinds of principles end up being helpful there too. In terms of weekly rhythms, I think it's really important, especially since our time will be in likely wherever you are right now, doing school, doing fun, sleeping, eating, all that kind of stuff. Having some of these weekly rhythms that allow you to kind of disengage in a healthy, positive way. So it's a biblical principle of Sabbath, where Sabbath is not inactivity. It's activity in distinction from the activity of provision. And so if you're a student, that's the primary thing that God is asking you to be and do right now, is be a student, and to honor the commitments you've made for that. But Sabbath means you don't do school. That's incredibly countercultural. But when you start doing it and it's a habit, a rhythm in your weekly schedule, it really is incredibly powerful. Now, a rhythm that I'm starting to implement is a weekly digital fast, where just technology, not necessarily technology, but screens, phones, TV, all that kind of stuff, is just off for an entire day, 24 hours, to kind of connect. And for me, this makes sense because I've got family. I do have people that I can physically engage with. But it really is a reset, because I'm spending way more time in front of a computer, on my phone, communicating with people digitally and that sort of thing. So it's just a helpful weekly rhythm to have. And then weekly rhythms of worship. There should be daily things like that too, but we have some new opportunities to engage virtually with people and do church and at the same time and discuss it and things like that. So these are things that you don't want to not have in your schedule. We're not just trying to do school well, we're trying to do life well. And that means we need to be intentional about these kinds of rhythms too. A book that I've been recommending to people for the last year, it's called The Common Rule. And the book it's basically 4 daily habits and 4 weekly habits that are incredibly relevant to the modern world that we live in now. So the 4 daily habits are prayer 3 times a day, 1 meal with others, scripture before phone, and then 1 hour with phone off. So I get a meal with somebody every day, obviously. I have set kind of times for prayer, and I'll share some other ideas of how you can do that. Amy and I both turn our phones off. We don't just turn it on silent, we turn them off. We do it together. We hold down the button until you see the power thing. We turn it off for the hour after Joe goes to bed, because that's often the easiest time for us to just want to disengage, and then the rest of the evening kind of follows. So we both turn our phones off together. And then I do scripture before coffee in the morning. It's just kind of a tangible way to say what is really my priority today. And then the 4 weekly habits are Sabbath, fasting from something. So it could be food, it could be media, it could be technology, it could be sugar. 1 hour of intentional conversation with somebody, and then picking a set amount of time of media that you want to kind of curate in your schedule. So that's kind of a synopsis of the book. If you go to thecommonrule.org, I'll post that in the chat. You can find kind of a summary of that, as well as videos that he kind of gives for each of it. So a lot of it is free material now, which is great. So if you're looking for some really good kind of spiritual, practical habits and rhythms in your schedule, that's a great place to go. So I'll pause for a second. Do you guys have any questions about, again, these are principles that we're talking about so far. So, but do you guys have any questions or thoughts about creating rhythms and the importance of not just having a good schedule, but having rhythms? Okay, great. I don't see any yet. If you think of any, feel free to put them in the chat. So that's the first principle, create rhythms. The second principle, and this really goes along with it, is creating sacred spaces. So you think about what a classroom is. You can think of a classroom kind of like a sacred space. It's sacred for learning. It's set apart to be a place of learning. And it's a very easily recognizable place. There's kind of a front part of the room where there's boards or, a projector screen, maybe a podium, and then there's a bunch of chairs. And it looks different than other spaces. It's just you walk into a classroom and you're like, yep, this is a classroom. It's sacred. A bedroom, ideally, is a sacred space for sleeping or resting or different things like that. And so there are lots of examples of sacred spaces that we have. And that's the same kind of idea that you want to do. You don't get to be in a classroom, but there's still ways that you can kind of create a sacred space that you get to enter into when you go to class virtually, or when you work on homework or a project or different things like that. So when you do the same thing in the space with the same sights, smells, feelings, your mind and your body recognizes this space is distinct for this particular purpose. And this, even the word sanctifying kind of means to make something sacred, to make it uncommon. Sanctifying spaces for specific activities mark off that what you're about to do is distinct from other activities. And this will help you ultimately engage and focus on whatever you're wanting to do. And kind of I've broken this into startup liturgies or rituals that kind of begin to make it a sacred space, as well as shutdown liturgies, so that the assignments and homework and class and all that kind of stuff doesn't just continue into everything else you do, and all you're thinking about is school. That's exhausting. I know what that's like. So kind of startup liturgies. Basically, you choose a sacred space for the activity. So we're using online school as our example. You obviously need a computer for that, so that's going to be part of it. And, most of you share homes with other people. And so there may not be a great other space than in your bedroom. And it's hard when one space occupies multiple different activities that are very different. Sometimes when you're in your bedroom, you just automatically don't want to do anything because that's a place of rest. It's a place of sleep. It's not a place of high productivity necessarily. So you still have to choose a space. But this is, I think, probably the more practical thing. You create a tangible sensory ritual that embodies what you're about to do. And then don't let anything don't let anything common invade that space, like your phone. So my kind of startup liturgy for the day is, okay, it's not too hot. I light a candle because it has a smell, it has a sight. I do something to it and the candle burns as long as I'm working. Then I have a consistent prayer that I read. It's from John Calvin. I'm going to read it. It's so good. And maybe I'll post this somewhere too. He says, this is from John Calvin. This is like 500 years ago. It's so good. My good God, Father and Savior, grant me aid by your Holy Spirit to now work fruitfully in my vocation, which is from you, all in order to love you and the people around me rather than for my own gain and glory. Give me wisdom, judgment, and prudence, and freedom from my besetting sins. Bring me under the rule of true humility. Let me accept with patience whatever amount of fruitfulness or difficulty in my work that you give me this day. That was probably the thing that stood out the most when I first read this. Let me accept with patience whatever amount of fruitfulness or difficulty in my work you give me this day. And in all I do, help me to rest always in my Lord Jesus Christ and in his grace alone for my salvation and life. Hear me, merciful Father, by our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. So I light the candle, I pray this, and then I start working. And I kind of know, I'll share you guys my schedule and how I kind of lay that out and know what I'm doing throughout the day. That's kind of my startup ritual. And so as I'm working, I look over at the candle, and if the candle's still burning, I'm still working. I'm still engaged with that. And then I have a shutdown kind of ritual or liturgy where there's essentially these four things you do. You review the incomplete tasks and goals, because rarely do I finish everything that I set out to do, and that's okay. But I write down the things that I need to do in a consistent place. I've been using Evernote for my to-do list. Create a plan or adjust your plan so that you can get it done on the next day or that week. And then do something tangible that embodies the completion of the shutdown ritual. So for me, again, that's praying and trusting God with the work that I got done. And then I blow out the candle. And that's kind of that ritual of like, all right, I'm done working, and I'm not going to sit down here again unless I'm ready and able to engage with work again. I don't want to half engage with work or even half engage with my family and let that creep into that. That's going to keep me from engaging in these other things. So you can use some other examples. You can use songs, a consistent song that you listen to. Sometimes having a consistent playlist of songs that you only use when you're working on, homework or something like that, that can kind of make that space sacred. And whenever you hear those songs, you're going to think of, I'm working on homework. I've got some Spotify playlists like that. So that's kind of the idea with creating a sacred space. So you enter into it, you do something, you have kind of a ritual that every time you do it, the more you do it and the more consistently you do it, the easier it is to kind of get into that mindset of school, whether it's going to class, working on homework, studying, or things like that. And like I said, I prophesied. Here's Joe. All right. Any questions or thoughts about creating sacred spaces, or questions you guys have about your particular situations of, how do you do that with your environment or something like that? Again, you can unmute or post it in the chat if you want. Do you want up or down?
Down.
Okay.
Maybe my headphones.
Paul, I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
What do you think about changing places throughout the day. So like for me, I don't
Oh
have a
yeah.
specific room that I can like go to, and that's my, you know, workspace, because I have 3 roommates and we're all working
Right.
at different places. So what do you recommend for even just like that?
Yeah, that's the importance of the ritual, because depending on what it is, you could do it anywhere that you are. And it doesn't necessarily require a particular space. Again, the goal is to do something that engages your senses, because those will stand out far more significantly. So sometimes a change of place could do that. But I'd say as much as it depends on you, the more consistent you can be doing the same thing in the same place at the same time will make you want to do the same thing at the same time in the same place. So when your leisure or fun activities also occupy the same space of your work or school or something like that, you're going to have now some issues of motivation that are creeping into it, because you've got this conflicting experience of where your body's like, wait a minute, this is normally the place that we do fun things, and now you're trying to get me to work. So again, you have to be kind of creative, because we're in lockdown. We can't go to a coffee shop. That was part of my rhythm when I first started seminary. We had a coffee shop right next to our house, and from 9 to noon, Monday through Thursday, I'd be in there working on school every day. And that was kind of my rhythm, and I only did seminary there. And it was really helpful. We can't do that now. So, a particular beverage could be part of the ritual, or different things like that. So it's good to change up spaces, but, for students who need to be with their computer or different things like that, it's probably more likely you're going to be in the same place. But, for engaging with God or other people, like, do something that marks that off as distinct, so that it's easier to get into that mindset of, all right, I'm working on school now, or I'm working on an assignment or something like that. And I'm not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Captain said I should definitely share that prayer. I will. Wherever I end up posting this document or video, I'll type it up and put it there too. Okay, cool. We'll keep moving. So now we're kind of getting into managing different aspects of yourself. Because again, this is not just about time management, it's priority management, but also energy and motivation management. So, Joe, do you need something? What's wrong? Do you need to go to a different room? Yeah. Okay. Why don't you open the door? Oh, watch out.
Sorry. Joe, come here, please. Come out, please.
Okay, sorry. Managing energy and motivation. So kind of like I was alluding there, energy and motivation. Bye, Joe. They're more influenced by your rhythms and your habits than how you're feeling. So if you're feeling unmotivated, it's probably more a symptom of the kinds of habits that you have in place, or maybe not in place. So that's why, creating rhythms and these sacred spaces and stuff like that, that ultimately feeds into how energized you feel or how motivated you feel. So you're doing those things. They don't guarantee anything, but they will help. So in terms of energy, I'd encourage taking a 10-minute break every hour. I don't know if you guys have seen the Office episode where I think Toby's doing safety training, and he talks about taking, breaks for different things. And Michael adds them up, and he's like, if we take all of those breaks, we'd only be working for like 20 minutes every hour. Hey, buddy, would you like to sit with me? Okay. Hey, Joe. Is it okay if Daddy talks?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to look at the candle? Okay. But anyways, the point is, do your break restful things at the same time for 10 minutes every hour. And the goal with that is to do something active that engages you, again, in a different direction. So it's not disengagement, it's not distraction. Do something that engages you in a different direction. So do something active. Stand up, go make some tea, get a snack, walk around. Don't take that break on your phone. It's not going to do anything positive for you, and it's going to kind of There's a book that I read. Some of these principles are from this book. It's called Deep Work by Newport. And he makes this distinction between shallow work and deep work. Shallow work is work that doesn't really require much attention. It's kind of surface level, and it's usually things like checking your email, checking social media, reviewing a to-do list. That's all shallow work. And sometimes there's a place for it, but shallow work tends to distract us more easily from deep work that's concentrated and focused and really productive. So don't do shallow work in that break. Don't check your email. Stay focused on the, or don't let other, shallow things come into that, but do something active. It takes your mind off. And I've noticed I can start to physically feel when my mind is getting fatigued. And I've started to learn some of the things that actually give my mind a break. And it's usually doing something active, and not necessarily something entertaining. That's not necessarily going to be good. So again, with this, for as far as energy goes, eating well will help quite a bit. Exercising, taking walks, stuff like that. And then in terms of controlling sleep habits, I learned this. I took a class on sleep physiology in college. And he told us, if you want to have better sleep, pick the same time to wake up every morning, and never change it, no matter what time you go to bed. And that actually helps you regulate more consistent sleep in the long run. So choose a consistent time to wake up versus a consistent time to go to bed. Because, how many of you have tried to go to bed early and then you don't fall asleep for like an hour? You can't really control when you fall asleep, but you can control. Would you like to look at one? Yeah. You can control when you wake up in the morning. In terms of motivation, reward discipline, not frustration. So this is a habit loop of distraction, which is actually the same kind of physiological habit loop of addiction. So there's a cue. Oh, sorry, Joe. Can you grab it? So the cue is I'm bored or I'm frustrated. So it's kind of a negative stimulus. And then we kind of develop a routine. We switch to something that distracts us. We check email, check social media, play a game, read the news, do something like that. And then your body sends a reward, and you get this feeling of relief, a feeling of fun, stimulation, or social validation. And essentially that trains you to want to respond to negative stimulus like boredom or frustration with distraction. And it just builds and builds and builds on itself. So that's why you want to learn to reward discipline, not frustration. So when you get to the end of 50 minutes and you stayed focused, do something that's kind of rewarding. Reward yourself. Create a new habit loop. So rather than rewarding yourself with distraction, reward yourself with something that's engaging, but in a different direction. More. You can have one more. Okay, Joe? The rest have to stay in the car. And then one other thing in terms of motivation is get dressed. When you're at home and you don't have to go anywhere, it's really easy to stay in your pajamas all day. But that's going to make, again, it's a sensory kind of thing that's telling you, I should be relaxed all day. I shouldn't focus. I shouldn't try and do productive things. So get dressed in real clothes, do your hair, do your makeup, like even put shoes on. Like all of those things will, Emily said she's been living in PJs and it's ruining her. Again, that's why it makes it so hard to do things, is because normally you wear PJs all day when you don't have anything that you have to do and you want to relax and rest. So that's kind of, again, a way that you can be motivated, is that you wear clothes that you would normally wear when you're doing things that are productive. And then part of your kind of shutdown liturgy or ritual or something like that can be changing clothes into something comfortable. And that kind of signals to your body is, I'm done. I know there's still more things to do, but I'm done for the day. That can be kind of part of that. So any questions or thoughts about managing energy and motivation? Okay, cool. Again, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in there or raise a hand or something like that. Okay, we're actually making decent time. I'm proud of myself. I don't know that I've ever planned too little content for a workshop. So the fourth thing is managing focus and productivity. So again, these all piggyback on each other. So Cal Newport, he's the author of that book, Deep Work. He defines the law of productivity as so high quality work, productivity, equals time spent multiplied by intensity of focus. So oftentimes we put a lot of time into things without much focus, little intensity of focus. And we often have a result of that's a little bit frustrating, or that our work is not as high quality. So the whole point of his book is put really focused effort into a smaller period of time, and you have the same product in less time, and it's higher quality oftentimes. And I think for school, that's often true. So focus is a really important part of this. And here's the thing: when you're looking at a computer screen or your phone, the researchers and developers for all of these things have trained you to want to be distracted when you look at a screen. I read a study one time that was talking about how you retain less when you're reading from a screen, not because it's a screen, but because you're used to being distracted when you look at this. You're used to things popping up. You're used to changing tasks very quickly. So when you look at a book, nothing else is going to come up at you when you read this. And so the reason your mind can focus on it more is because it's paper, and your mind has associated paper with simple, and your mind has associated screens with distraction. So again, it's just an added challenge. You're going to have to, watch things on your computer. So there's no way around it, but there are things that you can do to kind of recapture your focus. So I'll move this down a little bit. Let me zoom in. Can you guys see this okay? I didn't ask that. Okay. So for focus, Newport talks about this concept of attention residue, and you probably all, once I define it, will relate with it. So it says, when switching tasks, part of the attention remains stuck on the prior task, resulting in worse performance on the next task or the current task, the thing you're trying to do. And he says that there's greater attention residue when the prior task is low intensity or shallow work. So things like email or social media, it makes it actually harder to re-engage, and more of your attention kind of stays on the simple things. And then also when the prior task is incomplete, it's hard to move on to a new task when the previous task is incomplete. So there are a number of things that you can do to kind of facilitate focus, and I kind of put some of these more in the productivity column, but there's a lot of really great web extensions that help you focus. So I'm going to switch windows here. So one of them is called Stay Focused, and it's a free web extension. Oh, I never did this. This is hilarious. Okay, I got caught in my own extension. So you have to type, in order to go to a website that wouldn't be good for you to go to, you have to type this really long thing in, and it won't let you go to the site unless you type it exactly right. And it's stuck on this. So anyways, the point of this extension is that it will block or limit sites that you don't want to go to. So YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, different stuff like that. You can basically set what sites you want to go to, and a maximum amount of time that you can spend on those websites. So there's a lot of extensions like this that you can use that kind of help you stay focused in a digital way. So a couple of tips for keeping focus. So don't do focused work for longer than 3 to 4 hours at a time. So if you try to plan 8 hours of school and homework and stuff like that, around 3 to 4 hours, you're going to start burning out. And now in terms of this equation of time spent times intensity of focus, you're basically losing focus. And so you're going to take longer amounts of time to do things that you could have done in a short amount of time if you had more focus on it. So don't plan, entire days of studying. You're just not going to be able to do it. It's not going to be productive. So 3 to 4 hours is kind of a block of time in terms of focus. Only work on one task or assignment at a time. I'll show you this in my schedule here in a minute, but don't try to do multiple things at once. Contrary to popular belief, humans cannot multitask. When you're trying to do something that requires focused attention, like school, it requires focused attention. So something that you can do is prepare your physical space. So I have a desk, and before I start work, I basically clear everything off of it that I don't need for work. By the end of the day, there's lots of stuff on it, cups, trash, different pieces of paper, notes, stuff like that. And so I cleared off. Then I'll also close, and this is really hard for me. I love having 20 tabs open, but close every other tab that you don't need for whatever you're doing. So just before this call, I was watching lectures for one of my classes, and I had my email tab still open in there. And I noticed, it has a little red bubble when you have a new email. And I was like, oh gosh, I really want to look at that. So I closed out all of those tabs so that the only thing I could see in my tabs in that browser window was the lecture that I was watching, and it helped me stay focused. So another thing is I would encourage you to turn your phone off when you go to class, whether it's, streaming into a class or watching a lecture. Just turn it off. You don't need it. You're on your computer already. We think that people are going to need to contact us, or we might need to do something. It's just like, yeah, you really don't. So that's part of kind of making that space sacred, allowing you to focus. And I'll still find myself reaching for my phone, but when it doesn't light up, I'm much more quickly like, oh, can't do anything with that. I'm back on to, what I'm doing. So those are some principles for focus and productivity. Next, we'll get into some practical things in terms of assignments and whatnot. But any thoughts or questions about focus and productivity? Emily identifies with me having 40 tabs open. You guys can, I have a ton of tabs open in this window. You always open a new one. Yeah, that's a good idea. But yeah, you do end up having 100 tabs open. Bridget says, what if we definitely have more than 4 hours of school to do in a day? Yes, that's true. So I'm not saying that you can only do 4 hours of school in a day, but after 3 to 4 hours, you need to have a pretty substantial break. Something that kind of resets you. Because I can't do everything in 4 hours necessarily. But your productivity is going to be dramatically decreased if you just power through. It won't work. So you need sometimes a 1 to 2 hour break, and kind of meals can be a good thing to do with that. Don't try to work through lunch. Like, actually take a break, go make lunch, make a good lunch, go for a walk, lay, pray, listen to music, stuff like that. Something that actually you can feel in your mind, kind of some energy coming back. And then get back into the next, 3 to 4 hours. Emily said she stopped meal prepping so that you can take time to do that. Yeah, you have to take extra time to figure out what you want to eat. Yeah. It's harder when you have a toddler who's just demanding that you make food for them and you don't know what to make for them. So we have to stay a little bit on top of that. Any other thoughts in terms of focus and productivity? Or Bridget, was that a sufficient answer? Cool. All right, so on to managing time and assignments. So I'm going to share with you guys kind of some ways that I do for this, but reality is putting together a good schedule. It's a life skill to master. You're not going to figure it out, even in college, but you need to learn the principles of it now. But the more that you put on paper or on, Google Calendar or something like that, the less that your mind has to keep track of, and the less that your mind has to think about things, the more it can focus on what it needs to focus on. So I'd encourage you, if you don't use a planner or some kind of scheduling app or something like that, you need to. This is not a personality kind of thing that some people need to be organized and some people don't. Every person needs to use a schedule. Now, that's my personal conviction, but again, I think it's really valuable. So again, use an actual schedule, and whatever you use, be consistent. Don't try to have 5 different places where you keep track of your schedule. It's just going to get confusing and hard to do. Sometimes I think of different ideas for how to manage my schedule. I've made my own notebooks before. I just got like a blank thing from Target, and then I have different sections in here. But this is kind of my schedule. This was a couple of years ago, where this column over here is all my school assignments, and then these are different tasks and schedule things throughout the day. One time I actually made an entire notebook, and I have things a little bit more formatted in here. So you can see on here, it's not going to be great, but it's kind of color coded. So in red, those are my school assignments. I have my top 3 kind of priorities for the day, and then this is where the actual times are. I've done a lot of different things. Currently, I'm on Google Calendar, and I'll explain why. I think there's a lot of really helpful things for that. But whatever you do, commit to that. An important principle of time management and putting things on schedule is start with your fixed commitments. So if you have class at set times in the day, you need to start with those in your schedule, and then kind of build it around that. And so put them all in. And one of the nice things with Google Calendar is that it's going to be the same time on the same days of the week. You can set it to repeat itself for as long as you want it to. And then you don't have to re-put it in every week and forget that, like, oh my gosh, I do have class at that time. So start with your fixed commitments, whether that's class or other meetings or different stuff like that. Put the fixed things in there first. And then another principle is you need to put all of your priorities in your schedule. Don't just put school in your schedule, because then all you're going to do is school, and only things that are good for you to have in your life as a whole, if it fits. So plan your priorities in your schedule as well. Put your assignments and projects in your calendar. I'll show you an example of mine in a second here. But then leave margin in your schedule. Don't plan things back to back. Leave, again, 5 to 10 minutes between things, at least. And sometimes have an hour block that you don't have anything in. It's gonna get filled most of the time. So leave margin in your schedule. In terms of managing assignments, so there's a principle called fixed schedule productivity. So I took one of the first classes I took in seminary. It was on research methods. It was basically a 1-credit class teaching you how to do research in school and stuff like that. So basically what they taught us to do, and I've been doing this ever since, and it's so helpful. You give yourself a hard deadline or time limit for every assignment, project, or exam that you need to study for. Now, what's hard about this is that you don't always know how long something is going to take. So here's where the discipline comes in. You're going to choose an amount of time that you want to give to that project. And when you get to that time limit, it's kind of like, all right, this is what I've kind of run out of time. So you get better at estimating times and that sort of thing. But for every assignment that you have, homework, test, project, give it a time estimate, and then you work backwards. So you probably know when it's due, but you work backwards from that due date and put it into your schedule. So you kind of break it into increments. So if a project is going to take 10 hours and it's due in a week, so go to that due date and place 10 hours of work into your schedule. And on any given day, you don't work more, but not less than what you decided to work on for that day. And I'll give you guys an example. I have a lot of projects that are kind of long running. And if I don't do this, then I won't know when I should be working on it. Am I making progress on it? Those kinds of things. So you kind of break it down into steps. So do 2 of the 10 problems today, or read 30 pages today. You get to your time limit, stop. Does someone have a question or thought? No. Okay. So let me show you my schedule and some of the ways that I do this. So I'm using Evernote for a number of different things right now, just because I can access it easily from all my different devices. How well can you see this? Should I zoom in? Let's see.
Yes, please.
How do I zoom? Let's do this. Let's see, is this any better? Yes, no? Captain, I'll come back to your question in a second. Hey, Joe, do you want to join us again? Okay. It's not letting me zoom in for some reason, but anyways, I can take pictures of this and show it to you. There's a lot of different ways to set this up, so use whatever works well for you. But basically, I have a column for what class it is. Right now, I'm in 2 classes. And then a column for what the assignment is, the due date, and then my estimate time for it. So this is for this week. I've got basically 3 assignments for 1 class that's going to take about 6.5 hours. And I try to estimate on the high side rather than the low side, because if I end up with extra time, I'll probably be able to do something. Yeah, I tried doing the control zoom, and it normally works, and it's just going boom. I think it's because I'm sharing my screen. Let me try this really quick. Nope, it just really doesn't want to zoom. Okay, well, I'm gonna share my screen again. I can make this public and share it with you guys later. But basically, I know what the due date is. I know how long it's going to take. So once I do this for my weekly assignments, then I'm going to go to Google Calendar. And this week is already filled in, and I can show you what it looks like with a not filled in week. But basically, everything in red, those are my seminary or my school kind of tasks. And so I have the equivalent of 3.5 hours of blocks for watching lectures. I've got the 2 hours that I need for reading, about 1.5 hours blocked off for the test that I need to take, some of my readings put in here. So I basically put it all into my schedule so that I know when I'm working on what. And I kind of let my schedule tell me what to do. If I've set it up well, when I do my liturgy and stuff like that, all I have to do is come to Google Calendar, and I don't have to think about, oh, what do I need to do today? I just go here and it tells me, and I'm like, oh, I'm watching lectures right now. Great. And I go and do it. And I can just focus on that one thing. And I don't have to worry about, am I going to get everything done? Because I know how much time I need to do it, and I put it into my schedule. So you can do that you should do that for every assignment, homework, studying for an exam. Basically say, okay, I probably need to study for about 5 hours for this exam. Put it into your schedule, and break it up. Don't do 5 hours of studying at once, but spread that out over a couple days. And then when you get to 5 hours, and it's the day of the test, you're like, okay, maybe I don't feel totally as prepared as I could, but I did what I set out to do. I'm gonna trust God with this. And so, Captain, this goes to your question. You said, if I don't finish something in our pre-planned time limit, would you advise against scheduling another time to finish? So this is why you need to plan margin in your schedule. So for example, you'll see some open blocks of time in here. I've put in the time that I'm not working. So these blocks here mean that I'm going to be working in that time, but I don't know what yet. I know something's going to be there. So say that I didn't watch the lectures that I needed to. This little bubble is, it corresponds to what I need to do. And if I didn't do it, I can just slide it right over here and boom, now it's in my schedule. That's one of the reasons I love Google Calendar, is that it's so easy to move things around that maybe I didn't finish, or something like that. So, or you can just draw, a new little time thing and say, I need 30 minutes to finish this assignment or something like that. So, that's part of, I'll play with you in just a little bit. Okay, Joe? In your shutdown kind of ritual, if you didn't finish something, then that's a good time to go to your schedule and find the time that you're going to do it. So that's part of that. But at the same time, I didn't try to finish all of my lectures today because I didn't need to. I know I didn't need to because I have it planned for tomorrow evening. So now I want to show you guys one other aspect of this. So these are for assignments, and I've got basically all of my assignments planned out here and how much time it is. So at the beginning of the week, when I'm putting in my schedule, I just come here and I already know, how many hours I'm going to need to do school next week and then the week after that. And this is really important because some weeks you're going to have more work to do and some weeks you're going to have less work to do. And if you know that ahead of time, you'll be able to plan for it better. And maybe like So for example, I learned today that one of my final projects is actually due in 3 weeks instead of 5. I thought I was going to have 5 weeks. Turns out I only have 3. I basically planned out, I'm making a creative project on the whole story of the Bible. I have 3 weeks to do it. I've already been working on it quite a bit up to this point, but I kind of sat down and figured out, okay, what do I need to do? How much time am I going to give to this? And planned out, the whole project, and calculated it up, and I have 35 hours to do. So this week I've had a lot to do in my classes. Next week I won't quite have as many hours. So that means I'm going to stack more of, thanks for joining, Megan, go rock that exam. I'm going to put more of this project time into next week because I know it's going to be a lighter week of my normal coursework. So would you like an ice cube?
2.
Oh, these ones are all wet, Joe. Where did the ones go that you had earlier? Oh, in your room? Can you go get them? Because these ones are all wet. Can you go get the other ones? Thanks, Joe. What was I saying? Oh, this helps you so that you don't have to do. So imagine if I didn't realize that I have 35 hours left to reasonably commit what I've set out to do in this project. And it gets down to the last week it's due. I'm not going to find 35 hours in 1 week on top of everything else that I have to do to finish this project. So I know that it has that, and I'm basically spreading it out over the next few weeks into my schedule. So projects that aren't due, within the week, you still need to do this kind of process and say, all right, how much time is this project going to take? When's it due? Work backwards from there and put it into your schedule. Does that make sense? Is this tracking? Yep. So again, it takes discipline because you actually have to do the thing that you plan for yourself to do in that time limit. And, you get good at this over time and practice. But at the same time, you may get to the end of something and not have finished it. I've turned in papers before that I've missed an entire question that they want you to address on a paper. And I just include that in the comments. And last spring, I submitted a paper and I told him, I was like, hey, I got sick. I ran out of time. So I just didn't do this part of the paper. And he said, I see that, but everything else you did was really great. So I got an 80% out of 100. I missed 20% of the paper, but it was kind of like, I couldn't do it. And I had given the time that I had allotted to it and I didn't finish the last part of it. And I trusted God with that. So I still passed the class. So there's going to be discipline involved with this and trust in God to say, sometimes we just don't have the capacity to do everything at 100% performance. And that's okay. That may not be what God is asking you to be faithful to. So any other questions in terms of, you guys have your particular classes and assignments and tests and lectures and that sort of thing. Is there anything that would be helpful as you guys think about your particular situations that maybe would be helpful to process or address? Did Emily just say yes? You have a question? Are you typing it? I get distracted by the corona. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Something I'm going to do tonight. So, your phone has, how much should I be looking at? That's a good question.
Sorry, yeah.
Probably less at this point, probably less than you think you do. At this point, not that much more can change. We're already in the shelter in place thing. We already know it's going to be devastating and all that kind of stuff. Like, there's just not that much more news that can come out about this. Like, every day the articles are pretty much the same. There's not that much new coming out that's actually edifying to you. You kind of know what the good practices that you should do are. And the reality is that if something really extreme were to happen that you need to know, someone's probably going to tell you. The news isn't going to tell you. Someone's probably going to know, and you're going to find out anyways. So with these kind of apps or web extensions that you can use, I have particular websites that I tend to go to. And so I'm putting those on kind of the block list so that during work hours, I'm not going to look at the news. And I kind of have a set time per day that I can do that. So I'm going to do the same thing on my phone. You can enable restrictions and set time limits on particular apps or categories or websites, different things like that. And then I'm going to give Amy the password. Because right now I have the restrictions on there, but there's the little button that says, give me a little bit more time, give me 15 more minutes. And I always say, give me 15 more minutes. So I'm going to give Amy the password so that I don't know it. And it's really to keep me from looking at things that I don't need to know. I do enjoy reading articles and stuff like that, but I don't need to read, an hour's worth of articles. Maybe 10 minutes is going to be enough. And then I'm going to go on and do something else. So putting those kinds of restrictions in place, I think is a good way to kind of go about that. So 6 o'clock, I want to kind of wrap this up here and then leave some more time for questions if you guys want. But the final thing is enlist accountability. Get other people to do this with. Life takes discipline and hard work in any context, but especially when you're confined to one space and cut off from physical interactions with people. Having a few close friends to agree to help each other to do these principles and practices dramatically increases your chances of not just making it through this time, but actually doing life well in this time. So I'd say find just a couple of friends, not many, because it's going to be hard to schedule that, but 1 to 3 friends, and commit to the same rhythms, regardless of whether you're in the same class or same building. Take breaks together and help each other do the hard things first. That's one of the big things I'd encourage you to do. It doesn't have to be somebody who's in your same major. No one has the same schedule as you. But if you create a schedule that has good rhythms and you say, hey, I'm doing these things and I want to do them with someone so that I actually do them, then you're going to be a lot more likely to actually do the things that you want to do. And then a practical tip, I've learned this from 3.5 years of doing online seminary. Every one of my classes has TAs and professors still, and they're good about responding to your questions and that sort of thing. But even in one of my lectures today, I had a question about something that I was like, man, I really wish I could just raise my hand right now and ask the question. And I couldn't. Essentially, what you have to do is, draft an email, send it to your professor, and then wait for a response. It's slower. It's not as easy. So that's why I say reach out to your professors and TAs early and often. It's going to take a little bit more time for them to respond. And that means that you just got to do it all the more early. They still want to help you. They're still committed to you. And the reality is, especially now, most people don't take advantage of office hours and raising your hand in class. With this new format, probably less people are even going to do that because just a degree of difficulty harder. So if you do it, I'm sure your professors and TAs are going to be really eager to want to help you and engage with you. So I think that's it. Any other last questions or things that maybe I didn't address that would be helpful for you guys, or maybe that you think might be helpful for people who might watch this later or something like that? How do you allot time for leisure and hobbies? Also, on getting distracted by phones news, I would check out a video called Digital Hygiene. Cool. Yeah, there's some really great articles and videos out there already on distraction and different stuff like that. Yes, I have this saved. Sorry, I'll come back to your first question, Zach. I have this saved as a PDF, and I'll send this out somewhere. Actually, is there a way that I can share files in here? There's got to be. Maybe I'll do that in a second here. But I'll post it somewhere. I'll post a link to it on Instagram and all the other places, stuff like that. But allotting time for leisure and hobbies. So you do need to have things in your schedule that are life restoring and fun and that sort of thing. But you kind of have to know what are my top priorities. And not that that's going to be the only thing I do, but maybe I don't get to give as much time in my schedule to the thing that would be really fun to do. But it's not necessarily something I'm being asked to do. So it should be in your schedule. I'd say kind of the principle for time management and priority management is put the fixed things in your schedule first so that you know what you're going to have, what you've already committed to. build your schedule around that. And then if you have an idea of how much time your assignments and all that kind of stuff are going to do, I'll go back to my schedule here. If you look at my calendar, I've got nothing planned on Saturday and Sunday. If I actually am disciplined in the schedule that I created, I have 2 full days to engage with my family and do the kinds of things that are, restful and stuff like that. So really, if you know what you need to do and you plan for it well, then I think you will have time. But if you're not sure and you're kind of just like, I have more, I could fill 24 hours a day with work, then basically say, all right, God, I'm going to trust you with 4 hours to go out and ride my bike and do something that's enjoyable, or different stuff like that. So it's good to allot for that. But sometimes when we don't plan our schedules well, we will end up doing hobbies or leisure activities when we really should be doing a higher priority task item. But we'll justify it by saying, I need a break. I need to relax. But sometimes the reality is we don't need a break. We're experiencing pain. We're experiencing frustration or anger or boredom. And we've kind of created this feedback loop that says, I don't like this feeling. I'm going to distract myself and get this easy reward, rather than the later reward of I disciplined myself and did the hard work and worked for another hour or 2, and I got the assignment done. So I both feel good about that. And there's that reward. I feel good about the work that I did. And now I have time to do something that's also fun. It's a different kind of reward system. So don't plan your schedule around your hobbies. You shouldn't live for rest or work. Either of those can become gods that we live for, that direct our schedule. And we need both of them in our schedule in order to have a balanced and flourishing life. But yeah, that's what I'd say about that. It's a good question. And it's hard too, because like right now there might be things that you enjoy doing that you can't do because of coronavirus. So we're get creative and ask God, Lord, would you show me some new ways to rest in things that I haven't necessarily done before. Other thoughts, questions? Cool. I'll probably post this video on YouTube and then share that link. And then in the section of YouTube, or the description part, I'll put links to this document and the prayer by John Calvin and some of the other things that I referenced in this time. So thanks for joining, everybody. I hope this helps you, and hopefully you can share some of these tips with other people. And again, if you create good rhythms and schedules and then invite somebody into it, that's going to help them too. It's going to help both of you. So I really encourage you to reach out for help. If you guys have more questions as you start trying to practice some of these things, feel free to text me or email me, and I'd love to keep helping you guys on this journey. So we're in this together.
Thanks, Paul.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
All right.